The sun had barely kissed the horizon when the first ship sliced through Earth's atmosphere. They came from every known corner of the galaxy, their hulls sleek and shining, each one a vessel of immense power and galactic prestige. Inside, the cadets were the best their worlds had to offer, forged in the fires of war, masters of strategy, and paragons of survival. But this was Earth, a place whispered about in hushed, fearful tones across star systems. The Academy's final impossible test. No cadet had ever survived its trials. No alien had ever returned. The landing zone was a testament to cold galactic order. Towers of metal and glass speared the sky, reflecting the early light. As the cadets disembarked, they stood tall, cloaked in the pride of their rigorous training. Some laughed, their confidence echoing in the vast space. Others whispered nervously, already feeling the strange, heavy pull of Earth's untamed energy. "They say no one survives here," a green-skinned cadet muttered, his voice trembling. "Not even the strongest." His taller, blue-eyed companion scoffed. "Weaklings always complain. We will pass." "Of course we will." But amidst the chaos of clanking armor and boasts of power, no one noticed the human in the front row. His eyes were constantly moving, scanning every detail, every shadow, every flicker of movement. He was smaller than most, perhaps physically weaker, but something about his stillness made the powerful aliens around him deeply uneasy. They couldn't place it. They had never seen a creature face the promise of certain death with such profound calm. The Academy's commander, a towering figure clad in imposing armor, stepped forward. His presence alone caused a ripple of fear, making every cadet instinctively take a step back. His voice boomed across the landing zone, deep and final. "Welcome to Earth. You have trained long, you have fought hard, but this place will break you. The forests, the storms, the predators, none will spare you. No cadet has ever survived." A nervous murmur swept through the crowd. Some of the confident laughter turned hollow. The human, however, didn't flinch. He just gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if confirming something he already knew. "Your first challenge begins at dawn," the commander continued, his voice like grinding stone. "You will enter the wilderness. You will be tested. Only the clever, the strong, and the lucky will survive. Most will fail, and some will die." The aliens exchanged confident smirks, their eyes falling on the unassuming human. Just another easy failure, they thought. A familiar, fatal mistake. As night fell, the cadets retired to their quarters, but the human did not sleep. He walked outside, feeling the wind on his face, tasting the air. The stars seemed brighter here, sharper. The forest at the edge of the Academy grounds felt alive, a single breathing entity that was watching, waiting. He knew survival here wasn't about raw strength. It was about understanding, listening. Every rustle of leaves, every distant growl was a piece of the puzzle. He'd survived worse. He would survive this. The next morning, mist coiled around the ancient trees as the cadets gathered at the edge of the forest. The first step into that dense wilderness silenced every whisper. The forest itself seemed to breathe around them. Branches swayed with no wind, shadows twisted into unnatural shapes. Then, a low guttural growl echoed from the darkness. The aliens froze. Some turned to run. Others fumbled for their advanced weapons. The human simply took a step forward. He didn't fear the sound. He recognized it as part of the test. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. A colossal shadow detached itself from the trees. A creature larger than any building they'd ever seen, its eyes glowing with a terrifying mix of intelligence and hunger. Panic erupted. Their elite training screamed attack, but their primal instincts screamed danger. They hesitated, and that single moment of indecision could have been their last. The human, however, remained calm. He picked up a simple stick from the ground, not a weapon, just a tool. He then let out a soft, intricate whistle, perfectly mimicking a sound he had heard in the wildness of his own world. The giant creature paused. It sniffed the air, its massive head turning to lock its glowing eyes directly on him. The cadets gasped. How could this small human face such a monster without a shred of fear? A faint smile touched the human's lips. With slow, deliberate movements, he led the creature away from the stunned group, disappearing with it into the swirling mist. The aliens could only stare in utter disbelief. This was the cadet they thought wouldn't last an hour. Watching from a hidden observation post, the commander remained silent, his expression unreadable yet deeply intrigued. For the first time, perhaps, he was witnessing the true, underestimated potential of a human. Perhaps Earth had finally found its champion. As the sun climbed higher, it felt as if the ancient forest itself was bowing to this quiet, unassuming human who was ready for whatever came next. The first challenge had begun, and the universe would never forget this day. The forest waited. Shadows twisted like living things, and every sound felt sharper, louder, more dangerous. The cadets stepped into the wilderness, their confidence quickly fading. They had trained for battles, for wars, but nothing could prepare them for Earth. A green-skinned cadet tripped on a vine, his fear plain on his face. This is impossible, he yelled. A branch cracked behind him. Something large was moving through the undergrowth. The blue-eyed cadet raised his weapon, trying to steady his hands. Stay calm. Just follow the plan. But even his own voice shook with uncertainty. The forest didn't care about their weapons or their plans. It moved in ways they couldn't possibly understand. And then, the human took his first step forward. He didn't run. He didn't hesitate. His eyes scanned the forest floor, his ears taking in every sound, his feet feeling every vibration. A low growl rumbled from the left. Two eyes glowed in the mist. A predator, larger than any of the cadets could have imagined, stepped into view. Its teeth were like daggers, its claws long and sharp. The aliens froze, panic gripping them like chains. But the human just crouched slightly. He picked up a long, dry branch, twisted it carefully, and then threw it in the opposite direction. The predator's head snapped toward the sound. It moved away, curious, following the noise of the branch. The cadets just stared. How could he command such a beast with nothing more than a stick? But survival on Earth wasn't just about facing predators. The ground itself seemed alive. Sudden mud pits appeared from nowhere, roots twisted up to trip them, and hidden spikes rose from beneath the soil. One by one, the aliens stumbled. Their screams echoed through the forest, mixing with the growls and the cracking branches. All the while, the human moved with a quiet precision. He avoided every trap, every hidden danger. He'd silently help a struggling cadet, never showing off, never making them feel weak. He simply led. Suddenly, the mist thickened, and visibility dropped to just a few feet. The cadets were separated, their shouts lost in the fog. And then, the sound of something huge crashing through the trees came from their right. The predator, now confused and angry, had returned. The green-skinned cadet froze in place. "We're done for," he cried. The human whispered almost to himself, "No, not yet." He darted into the fog, calling out softly. The predator hesitated, then turned, following the sound of his voice. One by one, the cadets followed the human, unsure but trusting the calm presence leading them through the chaos. Hours passed, but it felt like minutes. Every step was a test. Every sound was a new threat. But the aliens began to notice something strange. The human wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. His mind worked faster here. His instincts were sharper. He used the environment itself as a tool, not just his weapons, to protect them all. As night fell, they finally reached a cliff overlooking a roaring river. The current was fierce, seemingly impossible to cross. The alien cadets began to panic. Some argued, others wanted to retreat. The human just stood there studying the river. He saw the rocks, the branches, the hidden patterns in the water. "Follow me," he said calmly. His voice carried an authority no one had given him, but everyone respected. One by one, the aliens crossed, following his careful steps across the treacherous water. Not a single life was lost. Finally, they reached the other side, collapsing in exhaustion. Silence fell. The predator's growl had faded into the night. The cadets looked at the human, a mix of awe and fear in their eyes. You survived," one of them stammered. "How?" The human didn't answer. He only smiled faintly. He knew this first challenge was over, but the forest had only just begun to test them, and deep in the shadows something else was watching, something far bigger than the predator. Eyes glowed in the darkness. For the first time, the cadets realized that surviving Earth wasn't about strength alone. It was about cleverness, observation, and courage, qualities the human possessed in abundance. The first challenge was complete, but the forest had more waiting for them, and they would soon learn that Earth does not forgive mistakes. The cadets had barely caught their breath when the forest seemed to swallow them whole. A hidden path spiraled down into a cavern, a dark, twisting maze that few had ever seen. The air was damp and cold, and every drip of water from the jagged ceilings echoed like a scream. The alien cadets hesitated, their advanced training useless against the primal fear of the unknown. "This is insane," one muttered. "Who knows what's down there?" But the human stepped forward without a word. He didn't hesitate. His eyes scanned the shadows, noting every crack in the rock, every glint of mineral in the walls. He knew this forest, this planet, sent them here for a reason. And survival was never going to be easy. This maze was alive. Floor panels shifted without warning, walls closed in. Hidden traps snapped shut with a deadly hiss. One wrong step meant the end. The aliens panicked instantly. They argued, blamed each other, and tried to push ahead recklessly. But the human moved differently. He was slow, careful, and saw the patterns they missed. Subtle changes in the rock, faint scratches left by those who came before. He whispered directions to the few who would listen, but kept his core strategy close to his chest. Suddenly, a section of the tunnel collapsed behind them, filling the air with dust. An alien was trapped, screaming for help. The others froze, paralyzed by fear. Without a second thought, the human grabbed a solid branch and wedged it into the rubble. He pushed, pulled, and worked with a quiet, focused strength until the trapped cadet emerged, shaken but alive. The others just stared, their mouths open. They had trained for war, but this human's calm, clever mind was saving their lives. Deeper in the maze, the shadows thickened. Strange, glowing fungi lit the walls with an eerie green light. Then they heard it, a faint scratching, soft but deliberate. Something was moving in the darkness, watching them. "Is it alive?" one cadet whispered. The human didn't answer. He crouched, listening, his senses alive. Every sound told him something. Every shadow hid a secret. He led the group forward, avoiding noise, avoiding detection. Without warning, a hidden gate swung open, dropping them into a chamber filled with spinning blades and swinging traps. The aliens panicked, some trying to sprint through blindly, but the human analyzed the chaos. He saw the timing, measured the gaps, calculated the rhythm. Step by step, he guided the cadets across. Some fell, but his calm determination pulled them through. At the far end of the chamber, another challenge waited. A deep pit filled with a bubbling, steaming liquid. The only way across was a narrow beam suspended over the abyss. The aliens argued, many refusing to move. So the human went first. One careful step, then another, his balance perfect. He extended a hand to those willing to try. Slowly, one by one, the cadets followed. His steady presence gave them a courage they didn't know they had. Finally, they reached the center of the maze. The air was still, almost too quiet. Shadows moved in ways that weren't natural. The human paused, sensing an unseen danger, far bigger than any trap before. From the darkness, a low growl rumbled through the cavern. Red eyes glowed in the shadows. It was massive, stalking them silently. Terror seized the aliens. "Stay calm. Follow me," the human whispered, leading them into a narrow tunnel where the beast couldn't follow. As they emerged from the maze into a small clearing, the cadets looked back at the twisting tunnels. They realized for the first time that survival wasn't about brute strength. It was about brains, strategy, and heart. The human stood at the front unshaken, ready for what came next. But in the shadows of the maze, something ancient watched. It knew the human was different. The trials were far from over. The maze had tested them, but it had also revealed a truth. Earth did not reward arrogance. It rewarded intelligence, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. Just when the cadets thought the worst was over, Earth revealed its cruelest lesson. Surviving the forest's predators and the labyrinthine maze felt like a victory, but the real test wasn't against the planet. It was against each other. Trust, they would soon learn, was a luxury they couldn't afford. As they navigated a narrow, claustrophobic canyon, the air grew thick with unspoken tension. The human cadet's competence hadn't gone unnoticed. His calm precision, his uncanny ability to anticipate every trap, had saved them more than once. For some, it sparked admiration. For most, it ignited a bitter, burning jealousy. If that human survives, our failure is certain, a tall, sharp-eyed alien whispered to his confidant, his voice a venomous hiss. We must act. Oblivious, the human walked at the head of the group, his focus locked on the path ahead, scanning for danger. He was their shield, their guide, and they followed, unaware of the conspiracy brewing just steps behind him. Suddenly, a deafening crash echoed from the cliffs above. A cascade of rocks tumbled down and panic erupted like a contagion. In the chaos, most cadets froze, but the betrayer saw his chance. He began subtly herding the others toward a narrow, treacherous ledge, carefully nudging his rivals closer to the edge. The ledge groaned under their weight, dust and pebbles skittering into the abyss. A fracture snaked across the stone. One wrong move and it would all be over. The human reacted in a heartbeat. He lunged, grabbing the nearest cadet and yanking them back from the brink. His eyes locked onto the betrayers, a silent, knowing challenge passing between them. Careful, he said, his voice a low warning. Earth watches every move. The betrayer's jaw tightened, but he wasn't deterred. He tried again, using the chaos to push the group into another perilous situation. But each time the human was there, countering the sabotage with an almost casual efficiency, saving lives without ever revealing the true extent of his abilities. But the betrayal was just the opening act. The canyon itself seemed to awaken with a violent shudder. A massive earthquake tore through the landscape, splitting the very ground beneath their feet. The air filled with screams and dust as the path vanished. Cadets were swallowed by the darkness, swept into the chasm below. The betrayer's scheme had backfired spectacularly. Now he was just as terrified as the others. But the human, as always, moved with purpose. He grabbed the few remaining survivors using a dazzling combination of strength and technique to swing them across widening gaps to solid ground. The betrayer watched, his jealousy curdling into raw fear. He tried to scramble ahead to save himself, but the ground crumbled under his feet. He barely managed to pull himself back from the edge, humbled and trembling. The human didn't even spare him a glance. As the dust settled, the survivors stared at one another, the silence heavy with the weight of what had just happened. The planet had tested their bodies, but their own comrade had attacked their spirit. The human finally broke the silence, his voice calm but firm. Earth is unforgiving. It doesn't care for pride or arrogance. Only those who think, observe, and care will survive. The other cadets nodded, the truth of his words hitting them with the force of a physical blow. Their own flaws were deadlier than any predator, and high above, unseen, a shadow stirred. Something ancient and powerful far beyond the creatures they had faced watched their struggle with patient interest. Earth was far from finished with them. The human led the way forward, the remaining cadets following with a new, harsh understanding. Survival wasn't just about strength. It was about intelligence, courage, and having the will to do what's right when everyone else is lost. The canyon faded behind them, but the scar of betrayal would remain. The next trial awaited, and it promised to be even deadlier. The sun rose over jagged mountains, casting long shadows on the cadets. The betrayal in the canyon had left them shaken, their confidence replaced by a growing awareness of Earth's relentless danger, and of the human who now led them. The alien cadets whispered among themselves, their voices hushed with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "How does he survive everything?" one asked. "We've trained for centuries, yet he makes it look effortless." But the human heard nothing. His focus was absolute, his gaze locked on the treacherous terrain ahead. Rocks jutted out like sharp teeth. Streams of boiling water carved paths across the trail. Fierce winds tore at their bodies. Every single step demanded strategy, endurance, and an unwavering focus. Then the first true test of the day emerged. A river, wider and more violent than any they had crossed before. Panic flickered among the alien cadets. Their advanced weapons were useless here. One wrong move and the raging current would sweep them away forever. The human, however, remained calm. He studied the river, observing its flow, the placement of rocks, the shifting currents. Then, without a word, he began to build. Using fallen logs, heavy stones, and thick vines, he started constructing a crude but effective bridge. The other cadets stared, completely baffled. "Follow me," he said calmly once the structure was stable. Step by step, he led them across the churning water. The bridge held firm. Not a single cadet was lost. The aliens' whispers of doubt transformed into murmurs of awe. They were beginning to understand. Survival here wasn't about raw power or superior technology. It was about intelligence, planning, and quick, decisive thinking. As the hours passed, the challenges grew harsher. Fields of poisonous plants, camouflaged pits, and sudden violent storms tested their limits. The alien cadets struggled, their advanced training proving inadequate. Some were on the verge of giving up. The human, however, adapted to everything thrown his way. He used the environment to his advantage, crafting tools from scraps and turning dangers into opportunities. Finally, one of the alien cadets approached him, their voice hesitant. How are you doing all this?" A faint smile touched the human's lips. "Earth teaches you differently," he replied. "You have to observe. Adapt. Think 3 steps ahead. Strength alone won't save you here." As the day wore on, the others started to notice the patterns. Every trap that had caught them off guard, the human had silently avoided. Every obstacle that had seemed insurmountable, he had used to his advantage. Slowly, they began to copy his methods, learning from his actions even without direct instruction. It was as if the forest itself was reacting to him. Storms that should have thrown them into chaos seemed to bend around their path. Predators that had stalked them earlier now kept their distance, watching with a curious but cautious respect. The cadets realized something profound. Humans weren't the weakest species in the galaxy. They were clever, adaptable, and fearless in a way that defied all logic. By nightfall, the survivors reached a plateau overlooking a vast valley. The view was breathtaking. The day's trials had been brutal, but thanks to their guide, they had all made it. Every eye turned to the quiet human figure standing at the edge, calm and composed. Even the one who had betrayed them before now looked at him with newfound respect. I underestimated him," he muttered under his breath. The human's gaze swept across the valley below. "Tomorrow will be harder," he said softly, his voice carrying on the wind. "The final trials are coming. Only those who stay sharp will survive." The cadets nodded in unison. They were learning, slowly, painfully. The universe's oldest lesson was sinking in. On a planet like Earth, cleverness, observation, and courage were worth far more than brute strength. As they began to set up camp, distant howls echoed through the valley. Something much larger than the predators they had faced before was on the move. The forest was alive with unseen eyes, but this time the cadets weren't afraid. They had the human leading them, and the human, in turn, remained calm, knowing that the true advantage wasn't just surviving. It was learning, observing, leading, and Earth was only just beginning to show its true power. The night was long, filled with whispers and distant roars, but among the alien cadets, one undeniable truth had taken root. This human was more than a survivor. He was the reason they still had hope. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this epic adventure. See you in the next one. Start with a tense, dramatic tone, building suspense. The edge of the plateau opened up to a nightmare. Before the alien cadets lay a vast, jagged chasm, smoke and steam hissing from cracks in the ground. The air was thick, humid, and crackling with raw electricity. This was it. The final trial. The Earth core chamber, a place from which no cadet in the history of the Academy had ever returned. Instantly, the bravado of the alien cadets evaporated. They froze, their advanced senses overwhelmed. The chasm seemed to stretch into infinity. The heat was a physical blow, so intense it felt like their skin was blistering. Beneath their feet, the very ground trembled with a deep, unsettling rhythm. Panic began to set in. Some started arguing, their voices sharp with fear. Here, in this primal furnace, their superior weapons were useless. Their incredible strength meant nothing. The chamber was a great equalizer, and it was winning. But then, one figure moved. The human. He stepped forward, a picture of impossible calm amidst the chaos. While the others saw only death, he saw patterns. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned the entire chamber. He noted every fissure in the rocks, every surge and eddy in the boiling rivers of magma below, every slow, threatening swing of the jagged stalactites hanging from the ceiling like teeth. He wasn't just looking. He was analyzing, processing, preparing. He was ready. The first true test was a series of impossibly narrow bridges, swaying precariously over the molten rivers. The air shimmered with the heat rising from below. One wrong step, one moment of imbalance, meant a horrifying plunge into liquid fire. The aliens, for all their power, hesitated. Their fear was a tangible thing, a scent in the air. Without a word, the human went first. He walked onto the swaying bridge, his movements deliberate, his balance perfect. Step by careful step, he crossed. Then he turned and extended a hand to those behind him. His calm was infectious. Slowly, cadet by cadet, they followed his lead. Some trembled so badly they could barely walk. Some let out quiet sobs of terror. But with the human's steadying presence, no one fell. They reached the other side only to face an even greater challenge. The floor of the next chamber was a mechanical death trap of spinning blades, jets of scalding steam, and platforms that collapsed without warning. The remaining aliens panicked, scattering and running blindly into the maze. But the human's mind was already working. He saw the sequence, the rhythm in the chaos. He calculated the timing of the blades, observed the patterns of the steam vents, and identified the stable platforms. "This way," he yelled, his voice cutting through the pandemonium. He led them on a precise, calculated path, weaving through the deadly dance of steel and steam, bringing them safely to the other side. And then, they faced the heart of the trial. The core itself. A massive central vent pulsed with raw molten energy, bathing the chamber in a terrifying rhythmic glow. The heat was now unbearable, scorching their skin. The ground vibrated like a continuous thunderclap. The slightest misstep could trigger a firestorm or send the very platform they stood on plummeting into the abyss. The cadets froze again, this time in pure primal terror. Once more, the human assessed the environment. He saw the weak points in the surrounding platforms, the subtle changes in the timing of the core's molten pulses. He formulated a plan, a path through the inferno. "Follow me carefully," he whispered, his voice a low, reassuring anchor. Every step he took was precise, deliberate. He guided the cadets, sometimes holding their hands, sometimes pushing them forward, forcing them to trust him over their own screaming instincts. Sparks flew around them. The intense heat seared their clothes. The platform shook so violently it felt like they would tear apart. Yet step by step they crossed the chasm. Suddenly a massive blast of energy erupted from the core, sending a shower of molten debris flying through the air. A cadet screamed, trapped on a small, isolated platform that was starting to crumble. There was no time to think. Without a shred of hesitation, the human lunged across the gap, grabbing the terrified cadet and pulling him back to safety, just as the platform collapsed into the magma behind them. The remaining cadets stared, their minds reeling in awe. The human hadn't just survived, he had saved them again and again. It wasn't strength that had done this. It was something more. Intelligence, observation, and a courage that defied all logic. Finally, they stumbled into the outer chamber. Exhausted, burned, and trembling, they had survived the impossible. The human stood at the front, his posture calm, composed, almost untouchable. Even the cadet who had once betrayed him looked at him with a newfound reverence. He is incredible, the alien whispered, his voice full of awe. The human said nothing. He simply nodded toward the distant horizon. Earth does not forgive mistakes, he said, his voice quiet but firm. But it rewards those who learn, who observe, who lead. Remember this lesson. The cadets nodded, a profound understanding dawning on them. Survival wasn't just about power or advanced weaponry. It was about the mind, the heart, and the courage to lead when all hope seems lost. The qualities that made this one human so extraordinary. As they walked away from the chamber, the core's terrifying rumble faded into the distance, but the lesson it taught would remain with them forever. Earth had tested them all. Some had failed, many had survived, and leading them out of the darkness was the human, the one who had single-handedly changed the rules of survival. The final trial was complete. But the universe would never forget the human who faced the impossible, and won. The sun crept over the rugged horizon, its golden rays illuminating the figures of the surviving cadets. They were a sight to behold, battered, utterly exhausted and trembling, yet undeniably alive. None of them, not a single one, had expected to see this dawn. Most had resigned themselves to failure, to becoming another statistic in these brutal trials. But here they were, standing tall, and their survival was owed to one individual, the human who had guided them through every impossible challenge. The alien cadets looked around, their eyes wide with a dawning awe. We survived, one of them whispered, the words catching in their throat. Because of him. All eyes turned to the human. He stood at the front, as calm and composed as he'd been from the very beginning. He didn't boast. He didn't demand their respect. He didn't have to. It was a fact, as solid as the ground beneath their feet. His intelligence, his unwavering courage, and his sheer adaptability had been their lifeline, time and time again. Suddenly a massive shadow fell over them. The commander of the academy appeared, a towering and imposing figure whose presence usually struck fear into their hearts. His eyes scanned the weary group, taking in their disheveled state. Then, his gaze landed on the human, and for the first time a flicker of genuine surprise crossed his stern features. "You survived every trial," the commander said, his voice slow, heavy with disbelief. "Every cadet before you for generations has failed. And yet, here you are." The human simply nodded, his expression calm but radiating a quiet confidence. "Earth teaches differently," he said softly, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "Observation, strategy, courage, these are the keys to survival." The commander studied him for a long, silent moment. Then, in a gesture that stunned everyone, he lowered his gaze slightly and addressed the entire group. "Today, the universe has witnessed something extraordinary. Humans are not weak. They are clever, resilient. They endure where others fall." A hush fell over the cadets. They exchanged glances, a complex mix of awe, respect, and newfound humility washing over them. They had underestimated humans, judged them by their physical form, and that was a mistake they would never, ever make again. At the edge of the group, the betrayer, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice filled with regret. I see it now," he admitted, his head bowed. "Strength alone is nothing. Intelligence and heart, these are far more powerful." He offered a slight, respectful bow to the human, who acknowledged it with a simple nod. As they began the long walk back toward the academy, a new understanding settled among them. The trials were over, but the lessons were just beginning. They had learned that survival wasn't just about brute force. It was about strategy, courage, and teamwork, qualities the human had demonstrated in spades. Unseen, shadows moved in the distant forests and valleys. Earth still held its secrets, its hidden challenges. But for now, the first human had changed the game forever. Where aliens had seen weakness, a human had shown brilliance. Where others had met their end, a human had thrived. A sense of hope, real and tangible, spread among the cadets as the sun climbed higher. They finally understood. The galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. The human glanced at the horizon, silently observing the world he had conquered not with muscle, but with his mind and spirit. A faint smile touched his lips. This was only the beginning. The universe was vast, filled with greater trials, larger threats, and unimaginable adventures, and humans would face them all with that same unyielding spirit. The commander watched them go, knowing he had witnessed something truly rare. A human had just redefined what it meant to be extraordinary. The story of that day, of the quiet human who stood at the front, would be told across planets for generations to come. A legend was born. Earth had claimed its champion. Humanity had earned its respect. And this was just the start of their story. The trials were over. The surviving cadets stood together, bruised, exhausted, but alive. The forest, the maze, the canyon, and the Earth core chamber had tested them beyond their wildest imaginations. They had stared death in the face, endured betrayal, and overcome impossible odds. And through it all, they had survived. All eyes drifted to the human in the front row. Throughout the chaos, he had remained quiet, calm, and unshaken. He had led them through every single trial, proving that intelligence, courage, and quick thinking were the greatest weapons of all. The alien cadets began to whisper amongst themselves. "We completely underestimated humans," one of them admitted, his voice filled with awe. "We thought they were weak. We were so wrong." Even the betrayer, now humbled and shamed by his own actions, nodded in silent agreement. The human had shown them all that arrogance and brute force could never overcome strategy and heart. The academy commander appeared once more, his powerful voice echoing across the valley. "Today, a new standard has been set for all future cadets. Humanity has proven its worth. Let this be a lesson to all species. Never, ever underestimate the human spirit." But the human didn't celebrate. He didn't join in the relief or the quiet congratulations. Instead, he gazed toward the distant horizon, a thoughtful look on his face. He could feel it in his bones, a deep sense that Earth still had more to teach him. The forests, the rivers, the mountains, they all held secrets yet to be uncovered. And beyond this world, the galaxy itself awaited, with challenges far greater than anything they had faced here. Just then, a faint tremor ran through the ground beneath their feet. The cadets froze, their newfound relief evaporating instantly. In the distance, massive shadows began to move, enormous shapes that hinted at threats beyond their comprehension, beyond anything the trials could have prepared them for. This is just the beginning," the human said quietly, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "We survived today, but tomorrow the universe will demand more from us. Stronger tests, deadlier enemies, and impossible choices, and we will face them together." The surviving cadets looked at him, their eyes filled with a newfound respect and an unshakable trust. This human had earned more than just his survival. He had earned the right to lead. They had witnessed the extraordinary potential of a single human facing the impossible, and they had learned to follow where strength alone could not guide them. As the sun began to set over Earth's horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows across the valleys, the human in the front row allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. His journey was far from over. The galaxy would test him again and again, but for the first time he felt truly ready. And somewhere, out in the vast, silent darkness of space, new challenges were already stirring, awakening from their slumber. The first human champion had been chosen. A legend had just begun, and the universe would never forget the day humanity stood unbroken in the face of the impossible. The trials had ended, but the adventure, the challenges, and the legacy were only just beginning. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss what happens next. I can't wait to see you in the next one.